Good day and peace be with you. Welcome to Today with Ms.Cherry. Indeed, today is a blessed day because we have the privilege to be sitting down with Sir Paul Robertson, the founder of Scope Organization. Sir Paul Robertson is the visionary founder of Scope Organization, a pioneering force behind a diverse ecosystem of educational entities poised to revolutionize the global education and academic landscape. Hi, Sir Paul, welcome and join us today.
Hi, thanks for inviting me along. It's great to see you.
All
Yeah.
right, thank you so much. And before we delve into Scope's groundbreaking work, could you please share with us, especially to the audience and the followers who are listening right now, why did you establish this Scope organization?
Well, that's a big question. I have to go back to the 1970s. I'm pretty old, you can see. The story the story starts long ago, and you can interrupt me anytime you want to. Let me go back to my school days back in Australia. Honestly, I just hated high school. I was the worst student, absolutely. And I was so bad, I dropped out. I dropped out in third year. Instead of doing 5 years, one day I was just sitting on the lawn and I said, I'm not going to study anymore. I guess I was about 15. And that was it. I walked out of the school and quit, just like that. So, obviously no plans for the future, absolutely no plan. But life takes many strange turns, and I accidentally um, became a paramedic because of my brother, who was already one, which led to, believe it or not, getting into medicine. Right. So from being a dropout, I did quite well, and then the story I went through. I went through a lot of university courses. I went through the basic medical and nursing, etc. And then, of all things, this goes back to way before your time and probably your audience's time. This goes back to the 1970s, the Vietnam War. I was in the Vietnam War in the medical field. So it was my experience with Vietnam. Nowadays, I'm teaching teachers to work in Vietnam, but back in the Vietnam War, I was there trying to save lives. So that's way back. And then let me go back. My family history. I'm not, dare I say, I'm not overly religious. I am religious, but not overly religious. Yet one of my ancestors in Scotland, he began the Church of Scotland on my father's side. So one of my distant relatives began the Church of Scotland probably 500 years ago in Scotland. So my family line has been very entrenched. Back in those days, it was called the Congregational Church. It's changed names in the last 20 or 30 years. But I wasn't overly religious, and I went to Sunday school rarely, believe it or not. I wasn't a bad boy, but I just wasn't into church. And then, in my medical field days, I went to Saudi Arabia, right? This was a military posting to Saudi Arabia, 1982, 1983, 81, 82, 83. I was working in a major hospital in the northwest of Saudi. It was a Saudi-based hospital, American-run, but military hospital for military staff. And it was actually the same time, this is long before your memory of Middle East politics. There was a terrorist organization called the PLO, quite nasty guys, as a matter of fact, and they lived very close to where I was based, so you can see why I was there. And at the same time, there was a major bombing in Beirut, which was another reason we were there. So you can see it was a very messy world back in Saudi Arabia, which is, Islam, Muslim, deeply religious country. This is where, my life had been, I guess, from a dropout to working in a hospital on a military base is quite a leap of faith. God was obviously behind me the whole way. That's all I can say because nobody else was. And then one day, this is where the story begins. It's 1983, and I'm in Saudi, and my American colleague from the military said, let's visit a place called Medine Sala. Now, this is an ancient city going back to pre-biblical days, pre the days of Jesus, back to BC, before Christ. So we visited this ancient city, the Forbidden City. It's closed, but we were given permission to enter. It's guarded, it's closed. Imagine going into a mountain range, which has been carved out into like shopping centers, like, the SM malls, for example.
Mhm.
The mountainside 2,000 years ago had been carved out into what now I equate it to like the SM megacity shopping centers. So, so there was only, and it's banned, it's forbidden, nobody's allowed there. It has some very deep religious background with Islam and the Prophet Muhammad, which I didn't fully understand at the time. While I was there for 3 days with my colleague. We were just camping and eating out and eating noodles for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's all we had. Thousands and thousands of tombs and mummies. It was a burial ground from 2,000 years ago. Thousands and thousands of mummies, mummified bodies. And indeed, on top of the tombs, just skeletons falling apart, rotting away. So, we went deep down into the tombs and saw kings and queens of the old Nabatean Empire, pre-Saudi Arabia. Okay. Um, Nobody can go there now. It's forbidden. It's banned. We were just privileged to go in, and I think the reason comes clear in a minute. And then this is where my life takes some amazing change. I can't explain it now. I can't explain it then. My friend Don said, this is nighttime, about 8 p.m. He said, I'm going to go for a walk. I'll leave you up here. You can sit on the mountain and watch the stars. And tomorrow morning we'll meet up, go back to the base. So I was sitting on top of this mountain, a tomb. It was actually a tomb, a giant. Imagine sitting on top of an SM center, which was a tomb. Very mystical, magical. Around me there was graves, there was mummified bodies, there was bones from a long time ago. A very cool night, very cool night. Thousands of stars in the sky. And then I drifted off. I fell asleep, obviously. It was probably 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. And this is where the story becomes absolutely bizarre, and whether anybody believes it or not doesn't matter. I believe it. It happened. I saw it. I wrote about it. This is beyond the realm of believability. I woke up. It was still nighttime, but I woke up kind of in a haze, a shimmering haze. It's very hard to explain, like a heat haze. And there I was, standing on the tomb, looking down on the valley, which was like 10 stories below. I'm on top of the tombs, and I'm watching this funeral procession, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mourners dressed in white, the Arabic white, a long stream of them, and the pallbearers at the front were carrying a body on their shoulders. And I'm looking down in this shimmering haze. I have to tell you, it wasn't crystal clear, it was shimmering. And they were walking towards what is called in Saudi, in Medina Salah, the grand tomb, the grand tomb. There is one tomb where the main kings and queens of the Nabatean Empire were buried. So they were heading to this tomb, and I could see the tomb in the distance. And my mind is all over the place. What am I looking at? You know, is this a dream? And is it real? I'm awake, and I'm awake, but it's like a shimmer. And then I thought, just the thought hit me, this is the burial of Jesus Christ. I don't know why I thought that. Not being overtly religious, I thought that's the body of Jesus. This is his funeral I'm watching. And then this is where the story really blows your mind. People probably say, I'm crazy, it never happened. But there I was, and someone was standing next to me. And he said to me, "Why are you so sad?" I remember the words to this day. "Why are you so sad?" And I said, "Because you're dead." You being Jesus. So my mind is somewhere else. He's here next to me. He's down there on the funeral procession. And I'm standing here. From the corner of my eye, I see this person. I didn't look into the face, right? And he said many times, "Don't worry, everything's going to be okay." And there was a bit more to it. I can't remember crystal clear because it's in like you're in like a fourth dimension. I mean, I've explained this to psychologists and psychiatrists because I wanted to see if I had gone totally crazy, and they said no, in their opinion, what I was going through was real, surprisingly enough. And there's a professor in Canada who's probably the most renowned professor in the world on visions of Jesus. And he investigates thousands and thousands of people who say that they saw Jesus in the afterlife. And he said there's only 7 people in the world that he gives any credence to. The story was credible. And he said, and you're number 7. So there I am. And I just remember him saying, "Why are you so sad?" And I said, "Because you're dead." You can see the irony, this whole picture. And then I'm not exactly clear what the next minute or 10 minutes, time didn't exist. But there were some words which went in. I think my neurons in my brain must have been just all over the place. It was just a strange time. I mean, I've never been on drugs. I don't drink. And I'd had noodles for dinner. So it was not like I was under the influence of some drug. Anyway, I looked down on the valley. The procession had gone. They'd gone into the grand tomb. The person next to me was gone. So then it's hard to explain. I guess medically speaking, if you get a terrible concussion, it's probably like coming out of a terrible concussion after you've had a nasty bang on the head or something. But and then my colleague came about 2 hours later. And he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yes, I'm okay." And I explained to him what happened then and there. He didn't say, "Boy, you're crazy." He said, "Oh, okay." So then, now here's me, high school dropout, okay? I think my IQ must have been one of the lowest in the world in high school. Yet there I am as a medico in Saudi Arabia in this most amazing situation. So next morning, Don, his name was Don, he said, "Okay, we've got to get back to camp. We've got to get back to the hospital." So we were walking through the desert. We were actually very fit. We'd been trained to survive in the desert. So it was about a 20-kilometer hike back to the base. And we were walking along, and suddenly I said to Don, I said, "Stop." He said, "What for?" He said, "I've got a poem in my head," right? A poem in my head. Never written a poem in my life, failed English in high school. And he said, "Okay." He said, "Here's a pencil and paper, write it down. Otherwise you'll forget it." So I wrote down this poem. It's probably one of the most beautiful poems you'll ever read in your life. I think it's the words of Jesus, and it's about the previous life and the future life. A lot of people have read it, and there are a lot of different interpretations. Very hard. It's a beautiful, beautiful poem. I actually submitted it to a competition in Europe. Now, here's me, the high school dropout, and I submitted it to a poetry competition in Europe, and I won first first prize from this poem, my only poem I've written in my life, I can tell you. So that was kind of the event which I guess changed my life. I don't know if you can see this. I don't know if you can see this book. It's called An Evening with Jesus. I don't know if you can see that. I subsequently in Australia, or the Philippines, or China or Saudi, I've lived in different countries, put this together, and I've written a book about that event and a bit about the life of Jesus, etc., etc. But I couldn't publish it because my story is about the heart of Christianity inside a Muslim country. You can see the deep conflict that book would cause. So basically, I was saying in the book that I believe the burial place of Jesus was in the Nabatean Empire's tomb in Saudi Arabia. Of course, 2,000 years ago, Saudi Arabia didn't exist. It belonged to the Nabateans. They no longer, they don't exist anymore. They built a city in Saudi, the Nabatean Empire. They built one in Petra in Jordan. They were kind of the masonry, the masonors of the world back 2,500 years ago. So then that was kind of an event in my life which has stayed with me, perplexed me. I actually spent about 6 months doing a lot of research on the life of Jesus because I'm trying to work out what this is all about. So I spent time in Israel. I spent time in different Arab countries, libraries, trying to get all the materials together. So it's quite a fascinating story I've written, but I don't think anybody, I'm not going to publish it for the world. It's kind of the thing I can tell people about. But then, okay, now this is where the story, I mean, here's me, high school dropout. So I go back to Australia. And of all things, from a high school dropout into medicine, I got into law. I went into law school and came out a lawyer. Can you believe? So there I was practicing very high-powered law. I was in the High Court of Australia arguing cases before these old judges who were about 70 and 80 years old. Little old me, I was probably 35 or something. Very terrifying experience. But you can see the story, how I drop out from school, finish up in the Middle East, then I'm in the High Court of Australia. I was actually arguing Shakespeare, the meaning of the words in Shakespeare. I remember that clearly. And then I retired, believe it or not, and I went to Greece for a holiday. This is back in 1993. And this chap on the beach came up and said, "Hi," he said, "do you speak English?" And I said, yes, I speak Australian English. And he said, this is a Greek chap. And he said, "My name is Paros. My English teacher's sick. Can you come and teach the class for the day?" Oh, okay. I thought this will be easy. This is going to be the easiest thing in the world. War zone and religious issues and Middle East. Boy, oh boy, going into that classroom with Greek elementary school students was one of the most terrifying events of my life. I had the English book to teach. It was a disaster. It was a disaster, that lesson. And the Greek chap said, "How did you go?" And I said, I finished the book. He said, "Paul, that's the semester's work." So you can see. Anyway, from there, Greece, I went back to university, and I finished a PhD in linguistics and second language acquisition. And then back in 2000, I can't remember exactly when, the early 2000s. I'd never been to the Philippines. No, it was in South Korea. I'd actually got a job with the Korean government, working as a lawyer in the morning and as a teacher trainer in the afternoon. 2 jobs. And then that's where I met my Filipino girlfriend. She was living in Manila. So I jumped on a plane from Busan, Korea, got to Manila. That was the old Terminal 1. It was a disaster. I couldn't get out of the terminal to find my girlfriend. So here I am, 14 years later. We married and we've got 3 children. I'm here in Cebu. Along the way, I've set up some interesting companies. I've set up an academic publishing company, publishing legal research. The major thrust of the research is second language acquisition, how to teach teachers to teach, and what's the neurological underpinnings of language acquisition. I do dabble in law because I'm one of the main editors on the Law Journal, and I do travel the world giving talks on different types of law. So it's been quite an eventful life, and it's very hard to believe this has happened. I mean, from being a high school dropout, I just cannot believe here I am in Cebu with 3 beautiful kids. Very hard to bring it together. I know you're a religious teacher. You're very much into religion. I can't say that I'm overly religious, that Jesus lived and died, absolutely, beyond doubt. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what happened in the past, but that's ancient history. But I find myself talking to God or Jesus. I'm not going to separate, because these days in the Philippines, life is challenging. Let's face it, we've just come out of the most horrendous pandemic. Hundreds of thousands of people with no job. There's stress, there's strain. So I have a lot of conversations, A, with myself, and B, with a lot of the people in Cebu. We still do teacher training. I still keep that going. There's a teacher training company. Oh, I didn't say that. There's the academic company. There's the teacher training company, which went global. So we have a division in Dammam, Saudi Arabia. I've got a division in Russia, but because of the situation at the moment, we're not really pushing Russian TESOL until the war's over. Sooner the better. We do TESOL down in Indonesia. Pre-pandemic, we luckily sent hundreds and hundreds of great Filipino teachers all over the world to teach. Then the pandemic struck and we all stayed home for 3 years, bored, watching TV and reading books. And now, thank God, we are coming out of the pandemic, but there's still a lot of sadness, unhappiness, and drama out in the world of the Philippines, which I hope gets better. Look, so I probably talked too long.
It's all
Maybe you
right.
have a question. It's
Amazing
kind of a,
story. Yeah, I
yeah,
know this story is really something that is unique to your life. And that is why God has given you a lot of, you have a lot of mission to be done. And you have done a lot already, but it's not yet enough. That's why you are here in our country. So, um, and I think being religious is okay, but I believe that it is more on being spiritual that will give us the enlightenment in our life. Although I am teaching religion, Catholic religion, but I am open for knowing more about the other religions practices. And because Jesus is not exclusive for Catholics, I believe that Jesus is showing himself to all kinds of people in all religion. He is not exclusive to any religious organization. And that story that you have shared with us is really something that will inspire us, that Jesus is going to show to us, because I believe that being religious is good, but being spiritual is more on experiencing Jesus right now, not tomorrow, today, in our own life, in our own job, whatever we do, as you are doing your job before and doing your training the teachers. I believe that you have a lot of things to do now.